Hey Reluctant Preppers, this is showing you just how easy it is to purchase silver without paying any premium over spot price. You just go to sdbullion.com/rp, scroll down and enter the special code to get silver without any premium, and they'll mail it to your mailbox, discreetly packaged. Inside you'll find a beautiful 10-ounce bar of fine silver, and you are able to purchase that and have it and add it to your stack and your collection without paying any premium. And you're supporting Reluctant Preppers along the way. Thanks.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Tonight we're delighted to have a returning guest, Anne Barnhardt, founder of the former Barnhardt Capital Management and now the Barnhardt Podcast, is here with us again on Reluctant Preppers. She is a firebrand for virtue and valor and integrity wherever it needs to be called for, and she's also a outspoken critic of duplicity and for lack of virtue wherever it may be found, and an outspoken critic of that. She's here with us again on Reluctant Preppers to talk about Persecuting of Preppers, about universal basic income and the cashless society and how those will impact us not only on the macro scale, but on the home front as well. And as always, thank you for joining us on Reluctant Preppers.
And as always, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
First of all, and I wanted to congratulate you on launching your Barnhardt podcast. If you can just give people the 1-minute recap of what it is, where it is, how they can find it, how to get plugged in, because that's really cool that you got that going now.
Yeah, you bet. And I owe it all to my producer / co-host, Super Nerd, who does a fantastic job. And, you know, he's the guy who does all of the post-production and getting everything posted on the internet and doing all the editing, although we try not to have too much editing, but, you know, putting the music at the front and the end, just little things like that I really don't enjoy. And so it's a wonderful thing that he really, really is interested in all of that. He's a great co-host. We have a lot in common. We're on the same wavelength with a lot of things. And we do right now we're doing 1 or 2 podcasts a week. And we kind of have an informal goal to kick it up to maybe 2 or 3 podcasts a week here in the not too distant future. And, you know, we talk about churchy stuff. We did a podcast that was really popular wherein Super Nerd, and he has expertise in computer programming and so forth. He researched cryptocurrencies, and we just did an episode, and the whole thing was a primer on cryptocurrencies. So we're doing churchy stuff, we're doing economic stuff, we're doing political commentary, just anything that needs to be discussed. I mean, it's wide open. It's an open format kind of a podcast. On
one of your recent episodes, you touched on a topic that will be of vital interest to people on our channel who are interested in preparedness and making real material physical steps to reduce the risk for their families and be prepared for anything, whether it's a severe weather, whether it's a financial collapse, whether it's a societal unrest or undoing of our fragile debt-based monetary system, etc. You mentioned that in the wake of the Las Vegas massacre that there was actual steps being taken by some authorities to draw into suspicion people who simply are taking preparedness steps or looking at survival. Can you run down what you know about that topic and what people need to be aware of?
Well, first, I'd like to mention, isn't it interesting that, the Harvey Weinstein, Hollywood, knock me over with a feather, all those people are rapey psychopaths. That news broke, and now Vegas is pretty much completely forgotten and completely out of the news cycle. Just pointing that out to everybody. But yes, I did notice right away after they got into his house, into what's his name, Paddock's house, and they found more weapon systems. Obviously, he had numerous weapon systems up in the room with him. And so immediately what this evil, evil, evil news media and mainstream media immediately went on the attack and tried to make the argument that anybody who owns more than one weapon system or owns more than one long gun or does any sort of prepping, even though there's no indication whatsoever that Paddock had any prepping type affiliations. I mean, there's no indication that this guy had any political affiliations whatsoever. Everything is just completely mysterious and completely sketchy, which is mysterious and sketchy unto itself. There's no indication that this guy had any relation to the prepping community or anything. And yet, immediately, what does the news media do? They try to paint preppers as basically Paddock-style mass murderers in waiting. Just, we're all just waiting to go get unhinged and just open fire on massive groups of people. It's in one sense, it's not surprising because that's what the media is today. It's a propaganda arm for this just absolutely evil Freemasonic George Soros New World Order, whatever the hell you want to call it, whatever the name du jour is for this oligarchy that's basically running the former United States and to a large extent the world, certainly Europe as well. This is, again, why you just keep pounding and pounding and pounding on people. And it is good to see that we're making progress on this point. People are finally canceling their cable, canceling their satellite, just looking at this business that the media is your explicitly declared enemy. The media looks at you, and I use you in the plural, speaking to your audience, who, I basically have a feel for who your audience is. Us, people in flyover country, people who are not uber hard leftist social justice warrior, pro baby killing, pro sodomy, any of us who are not in that camp and espouse any sort of what could be called conservative, traditional, political and social and religious values whatsoever, these people in the media, these hard leftists, these oligarchs, we are their enemy. And they're now, they're just dropping all pretense at this point. And it is eventually going to get to the point, and we're in the early days of it now. It is going to get to the point where they are going to become violent. It is going to go French Revolution. And when it does go French Revolution, it's going to make the French Revolution look like a garden party in comparison, because these people are so far gone, so far descended into a truly diabolical, psychopathic narcissism. So many of them are so saturated with sexual sin, which just completely destroys, any sense of restraint, any ability to think clearly and logically. It's coming, and it is precisely because they are trying to paint preparedness and also being armed and ready to protect yourself as being an indicator or a precursor to a Paddock-like true psychopathy. It's all the more reason. Don't be intimidated. It's all the more reason why people like us should be doubling and tripling down on the preparedness.
So what does that look like? And specifically what you mentioned in your podcast, some of the things when people say people who store up food, people who buy weapons, people who own ammo, people who do, and your response to that is what?
My response to that is, I think I just kind of laid it out there. You need more. You don't have nearly enough. This is just another proof set that you don't have nearly enough. Keep going. Don't be intimidated by people. These people trying to convince themselves and others that simply doing the prudent, responsible thing in what is clearly a run-up to a major, major civilizational crisis and almost certainly to a hot war, don't let these people try to psychologically browbeat you and make you second guess and think that simply because you're doing the right thing and trying to be prudent and trying to prepare and trying to be able to protect yourselves, your family, and your neighbors in your community and your church, that you're some sort of a horrible, evil person. Just don't even. People still to this day, people are just being browbeaten and kowtowed and are so terrified of being called names or vilified or any of this stuff. Man, when these people start coming after you, you know you're doing the right thing. You know, what's the old saying? If you're not taking enemy fire, then you know you're clearly not engaged in the battle. And I would put it another way. If any of these social justice warrior loon types have anything but complete and total contempt for you, then you need to examine your conscience. There are certain classes of people that to not be hated by them is indicative that you are doing something or not doing something such that you are not living a properly moral life, that you are not manifesting virtue sufficiently, that you are perhaps being a quietist or a pacifist, or just trying to go along to get along.
Right. Sins
of omission, in other words.
Yep. You mentioned something just now that really struck a chord for me. I mean, you mentioned recently. I was just going to say, yeah, a lot of people actually were wearing the deplorables moniker as a badge of honor, over the last year and a half or so. But something that you mentioned in another podcast recently was about this, the call to valor and the call to self-sacrifice that has been lost in our culture, that those virtues. If you can talk about the contrast between the traditional Christian virtues of courage, valor, self-sacrifice, and the modern humanist counter virtues of cowardice and self-preservation.
Well, what it all comes down to and what it's a function of is narcissism. You see, the coward is by definition a narcissist. He's not willing to put himself out there to risk being injured. A subset of narcissism under the header of effeminacy is the unwillingness to do anything that would reduce your own pleasure in life. So anything that is unpleasant to any degree is something that the effeminate narcissistic man will not do. The other subset of narcissism is sloth, which means the aversion to doing anything that is difficult. Again, this is the aversion to doing anything that's difficult, whether it be the simplest little thing like, for any of us that we can relate to, just, cleaning the house or washing the dishes when you don't really want to do it. It isn't just that it is it's unpleasant to do, but it actually does involve doing labor, and it's something that you have to do. And let's see if we can think about something that is actually difficult. Well, I suppose exercise. I suppose taking exercise and doing something like that is actually physically strenuous and physically difficult. A man who is slothful will be averse to that. Again, all a function of narcissism. Everything comes down to narcissism. And so, yeah, we have this culture that for the last 100 years, but especially for the last 50 years, the baby boomer generation started in with the spirit of narcissism. Theirs was the spirit of indocility, of rebelling against the parents. And then their children, which would be my generation, I'm born in 76. And my parents were born during the war. Both of them were born during the war. So my generation, the spirit of oppression in people my age, 40, that's where it really starts to come in with full-blown narcissism. And then the generation beneath me, beneath us, these youngsters today, it's actually quite terrifying. Their spirit is the spirit of the occult. And you see this, watch the Drudge Report, you'll see like at least once a week some damn story about how the occult is just growing by leaps and bounds. Satanism, there's been a heck of a lot of news stories over the past year about these damn people casting hexes and doing, and like people in the political sphere talking about putting hexes on Trump and doing like witchcraft type crap. That is all this generational degradation spirit emerging from indocility to intense narcissism to now the occult. And the thing that's really scary about all this is that you would ask, okay, what's the next spirit that the next generation after the youth of today, when they start having children, what spirit will they descend into? And the answer is there isn't one. Because when a society descends into the occult, consciously turns its back on God, and starts actively worshiping Satan, as these young people today are doing, that's the end. There is nothing after that. That is the end of your civilization. And so that's what's happening right in front of us today. And so everything goes back to narcissism. I have a video. It's what I said was the last video I'd ever make. And I mean it precisely because it explains every pathology that we see in our society today. So someone, asked me a question about what the hell's going on in politics? What the hell's going on in the media? What's the deal with all of this sexual perversion and all this transgender crap? What is going on here? What is the reason for all this? And my answer to everyone is exactly the same. It is diabolical narcissism, and that's what the entire video is about. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes long. It's unpleasant to watch, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see how all of these things all come together and all have exactly the same overarching pathology, which is narcissism. And the narcissism is very briefly defined. Diabolical narcissism is very briefly defined as when a human being freely chooses to purge themselves of all love. And there are multiple reasons why people do this. But a lot of it, and what's really interesting with especially younger people today, and the hardest genesis of diabolical narcissism to unwind is when children are deified, when they are told that they are special, they are unique, that they are the arbiters of truth, that they are the arbiters of reality, that they are over and above everyone else, and that they only they matter. Now, going back to your question, okay, if you believe that only you matter, then what people today think is that their death, if they're going to die, it needs to be some sort of an absolutely grandiose sort of a thing like what you would see in an action adventure movie. I mean, everybody thinks that they are destined to be Bruce Willis in the Die Hard franchise, or any of these movies in which you have these completely unrealistic people who almost have superpowers. And this is also what's behind this ascendancy in this entire genre of every other movie being about these people with these superpowers, because that is playing to the narcissistic mindset, this self-deified mindset that these people in our society have adopted, that we're all gods or something like that, and everybody believes that they're superpowers. And it even gets down to stupid things like, for example, you watch a movie and a 110-pound woman beats the crap out of a 300-pound man. That is completely unrealistic. But what that's feeding into is this feminist social justice warrior self-deification, where these absolutely imbecilic women actually believe that, or that they can kick the ass if 3 or 4 grown men attack them, that they can do their karate moves and they can fight off 3 or 4 grown men. And I think what they're going to realize, and what some of them are already realizing, and what a lot of them in like Germany and Scandinavia, what they are realizing, is that when you turn that mindset loose and then you have these Musloid men come into your culture who are literally there to hunt and rape women by their own admission, these chicks, they're just sitting ducks, and especially over in Europe. Well, if you bring out the suggestion that, maybe people should be allowed to carry sidearms, and maybe women should be armed, and maybe the only real way that a woman could ever actually be a physical match for a man is if the woman is armed, because that levels the playing field considerably. But of course, they won't hear any of that because they've all been bewitched into believing that they are demigods, and some of them actually believe that they have superpowers and that they'll be able to fight off even one man who gets it in his mind that he wants to rape, kill, assault, whatever, And so, again, looping back to your original point, the men in the society, they are unwilling to do anything in their narcissism to risk their lives. And the point that I made in the podcast is the notion that, okay, if you have an active shooter, for example, or a Musloid with a machete, or an edged weapon of any sort, who's walking around as they've been this is getting to be a more and more popular mode of attack for them, or just with huge kitchen knives, just going around and stabbing people and so forth. If any sort of a situation like that unfolds in your presence, the only viable tactic is to run as hard as you can at the son of a bitch. Might you die? Yes, you absolutely might. But if you have a group of people and they swarm an attacker like that, instead of having 50 people die, maybe only 3, 4, 5 people will die. Well, that's better than 50. And in a morally sane Christian culture, this is kind of a no-brainer. But this is not what people in this society, in this fallen post-Christian, completely post-Christian, hyper-narcissistic culture will do. The notion that maybe it is the divine providence that I am supposed to get my head blown off by an attacker such that the people behind me gain, 3, 4, 5 steps on the guy and eventually can overtake him. The notion that I, in the divine providence, am actually cannon fodder is so repellent to this narcissistic culture that nobody will make the proper response when any of these things start happening. It's extremely rare. So like I said, you've got to start mentally preparing for this, and you have to purge what latent narcissism might have already crept into your mind, just being exposed to this culture that we've all been exposed to. And you have to start thinking and planning and rehearsing in your mind, okay, what am I going to do if somebody starts shooting? What am I going to do if somebody starts stabbing? And it always has to be the same thing. It's run at them, attack, attack, attack. Be ready to die. That is the morally sane, truly human response to when something like that happens.
Yeah, we've had Bo Dobozinski, who's the director of training at Sealed Mindset, which is a training facility in Minnesota founded by a retired Navy SEAL, talk to us about that very principle that you're talking about. It's the mental preparation and the physical preparation. You've got to have that muscle memory and your mind and your emotions set so that it's not a matter of hemming and hawing and stewing and debating when the time comes. You already are ready, and that's part of preparedness. It's the other part of preparedness is being mentally and physically prepared to take the right action. And it's the countercultural action by far. It's not what we were trained. Even the last, you mentioned 2 or 3 generations have been trained right out of this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If we could turn now to a topic that you actually introduced on our channel a few months back, and that was universal basic income. It's interesting what a flashpoint that's been when we bring that up either on this channel or in other conversations. People usually come on pretty hot or cold about that. Most people either say, yes, it's dangerous, and the people aren't aware of the darker side of it because it seems to promise leisure, it seems to promise security, it seems to promise reduction of risk. And on the other side, people will say, yeah, it's not so bad. You can just take advantage of it. Use it for whatever it benefits your purposes. Why would you be against something as simple as that? Do you think people should live in fear instead? So could you talk to us about, and you mentioned that Mark Zuckerberg had introduced this concept quite publicly. Richard Branson has since joined, speaking out, and there's others who have joined that call for universal basic income. What is it exactly? Why is it touted as being the next great thing, and what's the dark side of that?